6 years of client data vanished with a single click from my boss. While the entire company spiraled into panic, I sat calmly sipping my tea because I knew I was the only one who still held their memories. The server room alarms had been screaming for 3 hours straight, but I wasn't worried. Brandon Hale thought he could erase everything we'd built, dismiss our safeguards as paranoia. He was about to learn that sometimes, fear in a folder is the only thing standing between a company and complete annihilation. My name is Emily Carter, and for 6 years, I've been the Senior Data Preservation Specialist at Blue Peak Analytics. It's a title that sounds more glamorous than it is, essentially. I'm the person who makes sure that when our clients need their data from 3 years ago at 2:30 in the morning, it's there, intact, and accessible. I'm 36 years old, and I've spent the better part of my career building what I consider to be the most robust backup system in the analytics industry. The server room alarm had been going off since 5:45 this morning. Most people would panic at that sound, a shrill, mechanical wail that cuts through the air like a digital scream. But I knew better. I'd designed that alarm system myself, along with 17 other fail-safes that would trigger long before any real damage could occur. The alarm wasn't telling me something was broken. It was telling me someone had deliberately dismantled my protections. I stood in the doorway of server room B, watching the red warning lights paint everything in alternating shadows. The temperature gauge read 78 degrees Fahrenheit, well above the optimal 65 we maintained religiously. Someone had disabled the cooling system override I'd installed last spring. Someone who thought they knew better. Blue Peak Analytics processes financial data for over 300 clients across the East Coast. We're talking about pension funds, investment portfolios, tax records, the kind of information that, if lost, doesn't just mean inconvenience. It means lawsuits, bankruptcy, lives destroyed. I've always thought of myself as the keeper of memories, the guardian of these digital lives that pulse through our servers like electronic heartbeats. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah in IT. Emergency meeting in conference room A, now. I allowed myself one more moment in the server room, listening to the alarm's rhythm. It had been exactly 1 week since the company had announced its latest restructuring initiative. 1 week since they'd brought in their new director of operations, promising innovation and efficiency. 1 week since I'd felt the first tremor of what I knew would become an earthquake. Walking to the conference room, I passed by my desk and grabbed my notebook. The physical one where I'd been documenting every system change, every altered protocol, every ignored warning. Old habits from my days as a junior analyst, when I learned that the only backup you can truly trust is the one nobody else knows exists. The hallway felt longer than usual, each fluorescent light humming its own frequency of corporate anxiety. Through the glass walls, I could see my colleagues hunched over their desks, some frantically typing, others staring at frozen screens. The morning shift had that particular kind of controlled panic that comes from professionals trying not to show fear. I thought about the backup I'd run last night at 11:15, uploaded to my personal encrypted drive. It was against company policy, technically. But after 23 years in tech, I'd learned that technically was often the distance between keeping your job and saving your job. As I reached for the conference room door handle, I caught my reflection in the glass, composed, professional, unreadable. Inside, executives were already gathering, their faces grave. Whatever was coming, whatever disaster was about to unfold. I was ready, because while everyone else had been focused on moving fast and breaking things, I'd been quietly making sure the things we broke could be put back together. The door opened, and I stepped into what I knew would be the beginning of the end. Or perhaps, if I played it right, just the end of the beginning. Brandon Hale entered the conference room at precisely 9:05, 15 minutes late to his own emergency meeting. He wore wrinkled khakis and a polo shirt with a tech conference logo from 3 years ago, the uniform of someone who believed casual dress equated to innovative thinking. At 40, he had that particular swagger of middle management who'd read too many disruption manifestos and not enough disaster reports. Sorry, he said, not sounding sorry at all. Had to grab my green juice. Can't innovate on an empty stomach, right? He set down his laptop covered in startup stickers and surveyed the room like a general reviewing troops. His eyes landed on me last, a brief flicker of something I couldn't quite read. Dismissal, annoyance. It would become clear soon enough. All right, team, Brandon began, pulling up a PowerPoint titled Operation Streamline. I know the alarms got everyone worked up this morning, but that's exactly why we need to talk about our antiquated systems. Antiquated. I'd been hearing that word a lot since Brandon arrived. Everything was antiquated to him: our backup protocols, our verification systems, our obsessive documentation practices. He spoke about the company's infrastructure like it was a cluttered attic instead of a precisely calibrated machine. Emily, he said, turning to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I've been reviewing your backup protocols. Fascinating stuff. Really comprehensive. The way he said comprehensive made it sound like a disease. But here's the thing, he continued, clicking to a slide showing our server costs. We're spending 40% of our IT budget on redundancies. 40%, that's fear-based thinking. He paused, clearly pleased with himself, then delivered the line that would echo in my mind for weeks to come. Backups are just fear in a folder. The room went silent. Sarah from IT looked at me, her eyes wide. Marcus from finance actually gasped. But I kept my expression neutral, professional. I'd learned long ago that the first person to show emotion in a corporate battle had already lost. Interesting perspective, I said calmly. Could you elaborate on how you'd handle data recovery without our current backup system? Brandon's smile widened. See, that's old school thinking. With modern cloud architecture and real-time syncing, we don't need 7 different backup layers. We don't need daily incrementals and weekly fulls and monthly archives. It's like wearing 3 seatbelts at some point. You're just admitting you don't trust your driving. It's more like having a seatbelt, airbags, and crumple zones, I countered. Each serves a different purpose in a different type of crash. Crash. Brandon laughed. See? That's the fear talking. When was the last time we actually needed to restore from a backup? I've been here a week, and I've seen 0 critical failures. A week? He'd been here 1 week and thought he understood 6 years of carefully calibrated systems. I thought about the ransomware attack we deflected 3 months ago. The database corruption we'd recovered from in minutes instead of days. The client who'd accidentally deleted 2 years of records and called us crying at 3 a.m. until we restored everything from our archives. We haven't had critical failures because the backup systems prevent them from becoming critical, I said. Or, Brandon countered, we haven't had critical failures because our core systems are more robust than you think. We're about to find out. He clicked to the next slide. Phase 1, eliminate redundant redundancies. My blood ran cold as I read his bullet points. He wanted to cut our backup frequency by 70%. Eliminate offsite storage. Remove unnecessary verification checksums. Disable automatic alerts for minor discrepancies. This will save us $2 million annually, he announced. Money we can invest in actual innovation instead of digital hoarding. Digital hoarding. He made it sound like I was keeping old newspapers in my server room instead of the financial lives of 300 companies. Brandon, I said, keeping my voice steady, I appreciate the focus on efficiency, but perhaps we could start with a smaller pilot program, test these changes on non-critical systems first. That's the fear talking again, Emily. He shook his head with exaggerated disappointment. Sometimes you just have to rip off the Band-Aid. Trust the process. Trust the process. The corporate equivalent of hold my beer. As the meeting continued, Brandon outlined his timeline. Aggressive barely covered it. Full implementation in 2 weeks. No testing phase. No rollback plan. Just faith in his vision of a lean, mean data machine. I took careful notes, documenting every word. Not because I needed to remember his plan, but because I needed evidence of exactly who had decided to play Russian roulette with our client's data. When the meeting ended, Brandon caught my arm as I headed for the door. Emily, I know this is hard. You've built something extensive here, but sometimes we have to let go of our old safety blankets to reach new heights. I looked him straight in the eye. Sometimes, Brandon, those safety blankets are the only thing keeping us from freezing to death. He laughed, mistaking my warning for a joke. As I walked back to my desk, I already knew what I had to do. If Brandon wanted to dismantle 6 years of protection, I'd make sure I had my own safety blanket ready. It was time to start my own backup plan. The dismantling began on a Tuesday at 10:30 in the morning. Brandon sent out an email with the subject line, Exciting optimization updates. Corporate speak for, I'm about to break everything you hold dear. I watched from my desk as he personally supervised the IT team, disabling our automated verification systems. These checksums are slowing down our processing by 0.3 seconds per transaction, he announced proudly, as if those microseconds were worth more than data integrity. Sarah caught my eye from across the room, her expression screaming what we were both thinking. 0.3 seconds was nothing compared to the weeks it would take to recover from corrupted data. But Brandon was on a mission, armed with spreadsheets and buzzwords. By Wednesday, he'd eliminated our tiered backup system. Why keep 7 copies when one will do? He asked rhetorically during the morning stand-up. That's like taking 7 photos of the same sunset. Trust your first shot. I couldn't help myself. Unless that sunset is someone's retirement fund and your camera fails. The room chuckled nervously, but Brandon's smile tightened. Negativity is the enemy of innovation, Emily. That afternoon, I pulled up our historical incident reports. In 6 years, we'd recovered from 17 potential data losses, rescued 43 clients from their own mistakes, and survived 4 attempted ransomware attacks. Each incident had been stopped by a different layer of our backup system, the very layers Brandon was stripping away like old wallpaper. I tried one more time, scheduling a private meeting with him for Thursday at 2. I came prepared with case studies, industry standards, even quotes from our insurance provider about the millions we'd save in liability coverage by maintaining proper backups. Brandon listened with the patient expression of someone humoring a child, occasionally checking his phone. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. Emily, I get it. This is your baby. You've spent years building this fortress, but fortresses are medieval thinking. We need to be agile, adaptive, dancing on the edge, not hiding behind walls. Our clients aren't paying us to dance on edges, I said. They're paying us to keep their data safe. Safe is stagnant, he replied, standing up to signal the meeting was over. But don't worry, I'm not going to leave us completely exposed. We'll still have real-time cloud sync. That's all the backup we need in 2025. That night, I stayed late. The office was quiet except for the hum of servers and the occasional beep from the systems Brandon hadn't disabled yet. I ran a full system backup every database, every configuration file, every client record from the past 6 years, 68 terabytes of data, compressed and encrypted with military-grade protection. As the progress bar crept forward, I documented every change Brandon had made, complete with timestamps and his email approvals. I screenshot his messages dismissing security concerns, saved his PowerPoints promising 0 critical failures, archived the meeting recordings where he'd overruled objections. At 11:45, I initiated the transfer to my personal encrypted drive, a sleek black device I'd bought specifically for this purpose. It was a violation of company policy, technically theft of intellectual property, but I'd rather face legal consequences than watch 6 years of client data vanish because someone confused recklessness with innovation. While the transfer ran, I created a detailed manual of our original system architecture, every script I'd written, every automation I'd built, every fail-safe I'd installed. If things went south when things went south, someone would need this roadmap to rebuild. Friday morning brought more optimizations. Brandon disabled our incremental backup system, calling it digital hoarding. He removed the automatic alert system that warned us about unusual database activity. Too many false positives, he said. It's crying wolf. I thought about the time that Wolf had been a junior analyst accidentally running a delete query without a where clause. The alerts had saved 3 million records that day. By noon, he'd reduced our backup retention from 90 days to 7. If you haven't noticed data loss in a week, it probably wasn't important, he reasoned. I made one last attempt, pulling him aside after the team meeting. Brandon, I've been doing this for over 2 decades. I've seen companies destroyed by data loss. Please, at least keep the core backup systems intact. He patted my shoulder condescendingly. Emily, I know change is hard, but you're too close to this. You can't see the forest for the trees. Sometimes you need fresh eyes to spot inefficiencies. Fresh eyes, as if experience was a disadvantage, as if wisdom was waste. That evening, as I prepared to leave, I ran one final check on my personal backup. Everything was there clean, complete, and safe. I slipped the encrypted drive into my bag, feeling its weight like a life preserver on a sinking ship. Walking past Brandon's office, I heard him on a call, probably with the executives. By next quarter, we'll have the leanest data operation in the industry, he was saying. Minimal overhead, maximum efficiency. I thought about leaving him a note, one last warning, but I'd already said everything that needed saying. Some people had to touch the stove to believe it was hot. As I headed home that night, I knew I'd done everything I could within the system. Now it was time to prepare for what would happen when that system inevitably failed. Brandon had made his choice. He'd stripped away our armor, dismissed our shields, and called our preparations paranoia. Soon enough, he'd learn why paranoid people live longer in the data business. Monday morning arrived with an email that felt like a punch to the gut. The timestamp showed 6:17 a.m. Brandon had been busy over the weekend. Team, as part of our ongoing optimization efforts, I've restructured system permissions to improve efficiency. Please see the attached document for your updated access levels. I clicked the attachment with a sinking feeling. There it was. Next to my name, read-only access. No explanation, no warning, no discussion. Just a digital amputation of everything I'd built. My hands trembled slightly as I tried to log into our backup management system. Permission denied. The database administration panel. Access restricted. Even the monitoring dashboards I'd created showed the same cold message. You do not have sufficient privileges. Sarah appeared at my desk within minutes, her face pale. Emily, did you see? I saw, I said quietly, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Has anyone else been affected? Just you, she whispered. Everyone else still has their normal access. What's going on? Before I could answer, Brandon's voice boomed across the office. Morning, everyone! Quick huddle by the coffee station. We gathered like sheep, some clutching mugs like shields. Brandon stood in the center, radiating the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences. Exciting news. I've been reviewing our scripts and automated processes, and I found some incredible opportunities for improvement. He pulled up his tablet. Swiping through code, I recognized immediately my validation scripts, my integrity checkers, my carefully crafted safety nets. These legacy scripts, he continued, are like training wheels. They're slowing us down, adding unnecessary complexity. Emily here did a great job for the old way of thinking, but it's time to evolve. Legacy scripts. He made 6 years of battle-tested code sound like archaeological relics. Brandon, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. Those scripts prevent data corruption during peak load times. They've saved us from theoretical problems, he interrupted. I've analyzed our logs, 99% of the time. These validators find nothing wrong. That's waste. People, pure waste. Marcus from finance raised his hand tentatively. But isn't that 1% worth? 1%, Brandon laughed. If your car's brakes only failed 1% of the time, would you worry about it every single drive? No. You'd trust the odds. The metaphor was so spectacularly wrong that I almost laughed, but I kept silent, watching him delete script after script from our production servers. Each deletion felt like watching someone pull bolts from a bridge while traffic still flowed across it. After the meeting, I returned to my desk and opened a new document. If I couldn't protect the systems directly, I'd at least document their destruction. I started typing. Monday, 9:45 A. Validation script, A removed. This script previously prevented mismatched data types from corrupting financial calculations during bulk imports. Monday, 10:03 a.m. Automated integrity checker disabled. This process identified synchronization errors between primary and backup databases. Every deletion, every disabled feature, every removed safeguard went into my record. I included links to the original documentation, the problem each script solved, and the dates of incidents they'd prevented. At lunch, I took a walk to clear my head. My phone buzzed a text from our longest-standing client, Jennifer Wu from Meridian Investments. Hey, Emily. Our reports looked weird this morning. Some numbers don't match our internal records. Can you check? My stomach dropped. I had read only access. I couldn't check anything. I'll look into it, I replied, knowing I'd have to go through Brandon now for any investigation. Back at the office, I found Brandon in the server room, physically disconnecting one of our backup arrays. Brandon, Jennifer from Meridian reported data discrepancies. Already on it, he said without looking up. Probably just a display issue. The data's fine. How can you know that without checking? He finally looked at me, irritation clear on his face. Because I simplified the data flow this weekend. Removed all those redundant verification steps. If data goes in clean, it stays clean. Physics, Emily, objects in motion and all that. Data wasn't physics. Data was more like soup it could spoil, separate, or get contaminated at any point in the process. But Brandon was already walking away. The disconnected backup array left orphaned on the rack. That afternoon, I watched him share my scripts with the development team, mocking their paranoid error handling. Look at this, he laughed, highlighting a section that checked for null values. It's checking if water is wet. Trust your data. People, I thought about the time that same null check had caught a payment processing error that would have sent millions to the wrong accounts, but my access was gone. My voice had been muted. All I could do was watch and document. That evening, I stayed late again, but not at my desk. I sat in my car in the parking garage, uploading my documentation to a secure cloud account I'd created years ago. Every email, every system change, every dismissed warning building a paper trail that might matter when the digital trails were gone. At 11:30, I finally drove home, my laptop bag heavy with the encrypted drive that now felt less like paranoia and more like prophecy. Brandon had taken my access, mocked my work, and dismantled my safeguards. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed that revoking my permissions would stop me from protecting what I'd built. He didn't understand that the best backup systems aren't just technical, they're human. And I was still very much in the system, even if the system no longer recognized me. Friday afternoon at 4:20, the entire developer team was buzzing about a minor UI glitch. Calendar dates were displaying in the wrong format, showing month, day/year instead of day, month, or year for our European clients. A trivial issue, cosmetic at best, but Brandon treated it like a 5-alarm fire. This is embarrassing, he announced, pacing the developer area. We have a board demo Monday morning, and they specifically requested we show the European dashboard. We need this fixed now. Sarah raised her hand. We should follow the QA process. Test it in development first, then staging. No time, Brandon cut her off. It's a simple display format change. What could possibly go wrong? Famous last words in any tech company. I watched from my restricted access prison as Brandon pulled up the code repository. Despite having revoked my system permissions, he hadn't thought to remove my read access to the version control system, a peculiar oversight that let me see exactly what he was about to do. Found it, he said triumphantly, highlighting a date formatting function. Simple fix. But I saw what he didn't. The branch he was working from wasn't the current production branch. It was an experimental branch from 3 months ago, before we'd implemented the new payment processing integration. A branch that contained old function calls that had since been refactored. A branch that should have been deleted, but had lingered like a digital ghost. Brandon, I called out, standing up from my desk. That's not the right... Emily, please, he said without looking at me. I know you're used to being involved in everything, but I've got this. Sometimes you just need to trust others to handle things. Trust. He wielded that word like a weapon, as if my caution was a character flaw rather than hard-won wisdom. I sat back down and opened my documentation file. Friday, 4:35 p.m. Director of Operations preparing to push code from experimental branch feature old UI test directly to production. Branch contains deprecated function calls incompatible with current payment processing module. Marcus walked by my desk and saw me typing furiously. You okay, Emily? Document everything, I said quietly. Whatever happens this weekend, we'll need a record. He looked confused but nodded, probably attributing my intensity to bitterness about the access revocation, if only he knew. At 5:15, Brandon made the commit. There we go, he announced. Fixed and deployed. See how easy that was. No week-long QA process, no redundant reviews, just identify the problem and solve it. The deployment pipeline lit up green, the code was live. In the old days, my monitoring systems would have immediately started running integrity checks, comparing pre- and post-deployment states, validating data structures, but those systems were gone now, victims of Brandon's efficiency crusade. I quickly accessed our production database through my read-only connection, capturing a snapshot of current table structures and recent transaction logs. It was like taking a photo of a building before an earthquake. You hope you won't need it, but you know you will. Everyone can head home early, Brandon announced, clearly pleased with himself. We've earned it, smooth sailing into the weekend. As people began packing up, I made one last check. The payment processing module was still functioning normally, but I could see the deprecated function calls starting to appear in the logs. They were like termites, invisible at first but gradually eating away at the foundation. I pulled Sarah aside as she headed for the elevator. Do you still have access to the backup systems? She shook her head. Brandon removed everyone's access except his own, said it would prevent accidental changes. Accidental changes. The only accident here was giving Brandon the keys to our kingdom. That evening, I worked from home, using my personal laptop to create a complete reconstruction plan. If the deprecated functions corrupted the payment tables and given the old branch's structure, we'd need to know exactly which tables were affected, in what order, and how to rebuild them. At 11:55 p.m., I made one final backup through a little-known API endpoint that Brandon hadn't thought to restrict. It wasn't much, just configuration files and recent transaction metadata. But it might be the difference between recovery and catastrophe. Saturday passed quietly. I monitored what I could through public-facing APIs and client portals. Everything seemed normal, but I knew better. Data corruption was like carbon monoxide, odorless, invisible, and deadly. By the time you noticed symptoms, the damage was often done. Sunday evening, I got my first indication of trouble. An automated email from one of our European clients. Payment reconciliation failed. Please investigate. Then another, then 5 more in rapid succession. I logged into my restricted account and checked the error logs. The deprecated functions had started triggering race conditions in the payment processor. Data was being written to the wrong tables. Calculations were firing out of sequence, and the cascade was spreading through the system like digital wildfire. But the real horror wasn't the errors themselves, it was the absence of any alerts. Brandon had disabled them all, as far as he knew. Everything was running perfectly. He'd be walking into that board meeting tomorrow morning, completely unaware that our entire payment infrastructure was eating itself alive. I sat back in my home office chair, my encrypted backup drive sitting on the desk like Chekhov's gun. Tomorrow would bring chaos, finger-pointing, and desperate scrambling. But tonight, in the quiet before the storm, I allowed myself one moment of grim satisfaction. Brandon had wanted to remove fear from our systems. Tomorrow, he'd learned that fear wasn't a weakness, it was an evolutionary advantage, and those who ignored it rarely survived to make the same mistake twice. Monday morning arrived like a tsunami hitting an unprepared coastline. I was at my desk by 6:30, watching the disaster unfold through my limited read-only access. The overnight error logs painted a picture of systematic destruction, payment records fragmenting, client portfolios showing impossible values, transaction histories vanishing into digital oblivion. My phone started buzzing at 7. Sarah, Marcus, the entire IT team, everyone was discovering the carnage simultaneously. But the most telling sign was what I didn't hear Brandon's voice. His usual Monday morning enthusiasm was notably absent. At 7:45, Jennifer Wu from Meridian called me directly. Emily, our entire Q3 transaction history is gone. The system shows we have negative 12 million in assets. How is that even possible? Jennifer, Our audit is in 3 days. 3 days if we can't produce those records, we're finished. Similar calls were flooding the main switchboard. The receptionist looked like she was manning a crisis hotline, which, effectively, she was, client after client reporting missing data, corrupted records, impossible calculations. At 8:15, Brandon finally appeared, his usual swagger replaced by something I'd never seen on his face before: fear. Real, bone-deep fear. His polo shirt was wrinkled like he'd slept in it, if he'd slept at all. "Emergency meeting, conference room A, now," he barked, his voice cracking slightly. The room filled quickly. CEO Margaret Chen, CFO David Park, our legal counsel, heads of every department. The atmosphere was thick with barely controlled panic. "We have a situation," Brandon began, pulling up dashboards showing error rates that looked like EKG readings of a heart attack. "There appears to be some data irregularity." Irregularity. David Park slammed his hand on the table. "Half our clients can't access their portfolios. The other half are seeing numbers that make no sense. We have 16 audits scheduled this week. This isn't an irregularity, it's a catastrophe." Margaret Chen, usually composed to the point of being statuesque, looked pale. "Brandon, explain to me how this happened. Yesterday was Sunday. What changed?" Brandon's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. "I implemented a minor UI fix on Friday. It was just a date format issue. You pushed code to production on a Friday afternoon. Legal counsel looked like she might faint. Without QA, without backups." "We have backups," Brandon said quickly. "The cloud sync." Sarah interrupted, her voice shaking. "The cloud sync has been corrupting data since Friday night. It's been faithfully copying bad data over good. Even if we had access to restore, which we don't because you restricted permissions, we'd just be restoring corrupted files." The room erupted, everyone talking at once, accusations flying, panic spreading like wildfire. Through it all, I sat quietly, waiting. Finally, Margaret's voice cut through the chaos. "Enough, Sarah. What do we need to recover?" "We need a clean backup from before Friday's deployment," Sarah said. "But Brandon eliminated our local backup arrays. Our retention is down to 7 days, and those 7 days are all post-corruption. We need—" She paused, looking at me. "We need Emily's backup system, the one Brandon dismantled." All eyes turned to Brandon. His face had gone from pale to gray. "Those systems were redundant, unnecessary. We don't need—" "Stop!" Margaret's voice was ice. "Emily, do we have any backups from before Friday?" This was the moment. I could have simply said no, watched Brandon twist in the wind of his own making, but 300 clients were suffering, real people with real money, real futures at stake. "I might have something," I said carefully. The room went silent. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hold their breath. "What do you mean, might?" Margaret asked. Before my access was revoked, I noticed some concerning patterns. As a precaution, I created a personal backup of our systems. It's a violation of company policy. I understand that. But given the circumstances— "You backed up our entire system." David looked at me like I'd just admitted to having superpowers. "Everything. Databases, configurations, transaction histories, client records, 68 terabytes, encrypted and verified, current as of Thursday night at 11:45. Brandon's gray face turned green. That's theft of company property. She can't—" "Brandon," Margaret said quietly, "if you say one more word, security will escort you out." She turned to me. "What do you need to restore it?" My access reinstated, full administrative privileges, a written guarantee of no retaliation for the policy violation, and— I paused, meeting Brandon's eyes. "A written agreement that Brandon will have no involvement in the restoration process and no further contact with me." "Done," Margaret said immediately. "Legal, draw it up. Restore Emily's access immediately. Brandon, you're suspended pending investigation. Clear your desk." Brandon stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is insane. I was trying to save the company money." "You tried to save money by removing the airbags," I said, finally allowing emotion into my voice. "Now we've crashed, and you're surprised people got hurt." He left without another word. Through the glass walls, we watched security escort him to his desk, then to the exit. 6 weeks of disruption ended in 6 minutes of reckoning. "Emily," Margaret said, "how long to restore everything?" "With full access and the IT team's help, 6 hours, 8 at most. We'll have everything back by close of business." The relief in the room was palpable. Sarah actually started crying. Marcus whispered what sounded like a prayer. As the meeting dispersed and we prepared for the restoration process, Margaret pulled me aside. "The backup you made that was incredibly risky. You could have faced serious legal consequences." "I know," I said simply, "but I've spent 6 years protecting this company's data. I wasn't going to stop just because someone revoked my access." She nodded slowly. "We owe you more than I can express. When this is over, we need to talk about your future here. I think Senior Data Preservation Specialist doesn't quite cover it anymore." As I headed to the server room, my encrypted drive in hand, I passed Brandon's empty desk. His motivational posters were still on the wall. "Move fast and break things. Disrupt or be disrupted. Fear is the mind killer." I thought about adding my own "paranoia is the mother of longevity." But I had work to do. 300 clients were waiting for their memories to be restored, and I was the only one who'd kept them safe. The emergency board meeting convened at 2:30 that afternoon. I sat at the conference table with my laptop open. Restoration progress at 92% complete. The atmosphere was different now, less panic. More cold fury directed at the empty chair where Brandon should have been sitting. Margaret Chen opened the meeting with characteristic directness. "Board members, we're here to address the critical data failure that occurred this morning and discuss immediate remediation steps." Thomas Reed, the board chairman, looked like he'd aged 5 years since breakfast. "Margaret, I've been fielding calls all morning. Meridian is threatening to pull their entire portfolio. Harbor Financial wants to know why their audit prep just vanished. How did this happen?" Margaret nodded to me. "Emily, please brief the board on the sequence of events." I pulled up my documentation, the meticulous record I'd kept over the past weeks. On Monday, November 4th, Brandon Hale began systematically dismantling our backup infrastructure. I have here emails where he called our redundancies digital hoarding and stated that backups are just fear in a folder. Gasps around the table. I continued, showing slide after slide the disabled validators, the removed checksums, the Friday deployment without QA. "But the critical failure," I said, "came from Mr. Hale's decision to revoke my administrative access while simultaneously eliminating oversight protocols. When he pushed unvetted code to production Friday afternoon, there was no system in place to catch the errors." "Where is Mr. Hale now?" asked Patricia Williams from legal. "Clearing his desk," Margaret replied, "under security supervision." Thomas Reed leaned forward. "Ms. Carter, help me understand. You made an unauthorized backup of company data. That's a serious violation of our data governance policies." "Yeah, sir, it is," I acknowledged. I documented my concerns repeatedly. When those concerns were dismissed and my access revoked, I had to make a choice: follow policy and watch 6 years of client data potentially disappear, or violate policy and ensure our clients were protected. "She chose our clients," said David Park. "If she hadn't, we'd be facing hundreds of millions in liability." The door burst open. Brandon stood there, security guard behind him, his box of belongings clutched to his chest. "This is a setup. She sabotaged the system to make me look bad." "Mr. Hale," Margaret's voice was arctic, "you were instructed to leave the premises." "No." He pushed past the security guard. "Don't you see what she's doing? She creates a problem only she can solve. Makes herself indispensable. Classic job security manipulation." I stayed calm, pulling up another slide. "Mr. Hale, here's the git commit history showing you personally pushed code from an obsolete branch. Here are the system logs showing the cascade failure starting exactly where your code touched the payment processor. And here," I clicked to the next slide, "is your Slack message saying, and I quote, 'Emily's paranoid protocols are killing our efficiency. Watch me prove we don't need them.'" Brandon's face cycled through several colors. "I was trying to modernize." "You were playing Russian roulette with our clients' data," Thomas Reed interrupted. "And you're lucky Ms. Carter kept that backup, or you'd be facing personal liability for the losses." Patricia from legal stood up. "Mr. Hale, you need to leave. Now. Any further contact with company personnel will be considered harassment. Security, please escort him out." As Brandon was removed, still protesting about innovation and efficiency, the board turned back to me. "Ms. Carter," Thomas said, "what would it take to ensure this never happens again?" I'd been waiting for this question. First, mandatory backup protocols that can't be overridden by any single person, including executives. Second, a formal data preservation team reporting directly to the board, not to operations. Third, regular disaster recovery drills where we actually test our backups, not just assume they work. And fourth, Margaret added, Emily Carter as our new Chief Data Security Officer. The vote was unanimous. As the meeting concluded, board members approached me individually, expressing gratitude and relief. Patricia from legal pulled me aside. Emily, about the unauthorized backup technically, we should pursue disciplinary action, but given the circumstances, I'm recommending we classify it as an emergency preservation protocol, retroactively approved. Thank you, I said, then added, what about my terms regarding Brandon? She smiled grimly. Already drafted. He's barred from company property and prohibited from contacting any current employees. If he violates it, we'll pursue restraining orders. By 5:45, the restoration was complete. Every byte of data recovered. Every client made whole. The IT team actually applauded when the last verification check came back clean. Sarah hugged me. You saved us. You saved all of us. I saved the data, I corrected. That's what I do. As I packed up my encrypted drive, now officially company property again, I thought about Brandon's accusation. Job security manipulation. No. I'd simply done what I'd always done, assumed the worst, and prepared for it. In tech, optimists write code, pessimists write backups, and when the optimist's code fails, the pessimists become heroes. My phone buzzed, a text from Jennifer at Meridian. Reports look perfect. Audit team says we're green across the board. I don't know what magic you worked, but thank you. Not magic, I thought, just fear in a folder. The kind of fear that keeps data safe and companies solvent. The kind of fear Brandon never understood. As I headed home, I made one last stop at my desk. Someone, probably Sarah, had left a small gift, a coffee mug with Chief Paranoia Officer printed on it. I smiled. It would look perfect in my new office. 6 months later, I sat in my corner office, yes. Chief Data Security Officers get corner offices sipping tea from my Chief Paranoia Officer mug. The morning sun cast long shadows across my desk, where 3 monitors displayed the health of our completely rebuilt backup infrastructure. Green lights across the board, just how I liked it. A knock at my door interrupted my morning routine. Sarah entered, now my deputy director, carrying a tablet with a bemused expression. Emily, you need to see this, she said, handing me the device. It was a LinkedIn post. Brandon Hale, now listed as Innovation Consultant, had written a lengthy article titled, How I Learned the True Value of Data Redundancy. I skimmed through his revisionist history, where he painted himself as a misunderstood visionary who'd simply pushed too hard, too fast. The audacity, Sarah muttered. I handed back the tablet. Let him have his narrative. We have our data. The truth was, I rarely thought about Brandon anymore. The company had moved on, stronger for the experience. We'd implemented every protection I'd recommended, and then some. Our backup systems were now legendary in the industry. We'd even won an award for excellence in data preservation from the Financial Technology Association. My phone buzzed. A calendar reminder, quarterly disaster recovery drill, 2 p.m. Every 3 months, we simulated a complete system failure. The entire IT department would scramble to restore from backups while executives watched nervously. It was corporate theater, but necessary theater. People needed reminders of what could go wrong. At lunch, I walked through the server room, my old haunt, now expanded with proper redundancies. The new backup arrays hummed quietly, each one a monument to learned paranoia. We had local backups, cloud backups, and off-site physical backups. We had hot sites and cold sites. We had contingencies for our contingencies. Some might call it overkill. I called it peace of mind. The disaster drill that afternoon went flawlessly. Systems restored in under 90 minutes, all data intact. The new hires watched with wide eyes, probably thinking we were all slightly insane for practicing for disasters that might never come. They'd learn. Everyone in tech learns eventually, either through wisdom or through pain. As 5 o'clock approached, I prepared to leave. My encrypted drive, the one that had saved the company, sat in a place of honor on my bookshelf. Retired, but not forgotten. Next to it, a printed email from Margaret Emily. Your paranoia saved us $50 million in potential losses. Never apologize for being careful. I shut down my computers, double-checked the backup logs one last time, old habits die hard, and headed for the door. In the elevator, I met Marcus from finance. Hey, Emily, he said. Did you hear Brandon's consulting firm just lost a major client? Something about a data breach because they didn't have proper backups? I kept my expression neutral. That's unfortunate. But as the elevator doors closed, I allowed myself a small smile. Karma, it seemed, had excellent timing and an ironic sense of humor. Walking to my car, I thought about the lesson hidden in our corporate disaster. It wasn't about being right or wrong, innovative or traditional. It was about understanding that in the digital age, data is memory, and memory is everything. Lose your data, lose your history, lose your history, lose your future. Brandon had called backups fear in a folder. He was right, in a way, but he'd never understood that fear serves a purpose. It keeps us sharp, keeps us careful, keeps us ready for the moment when everything goes wrong. Because in tech, it's not a matter of if things will go wrong, it's only a matter of when. I drove home through the evening traffic, NPR playing softly on the radio. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new systems to protect, new executives who might question why we need so many safeguards. And I'd be ready for them, armed with documentation, backups, and the unshakable knowledge that somewhere out there, another Brandon Hale was preparing to delete something important. But not on my watch, never on my watch. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone chimed with a final message of the day. Jennifer from Meridian. Emily, just wanted you to know we passed our federal audit with flying colors. Thank you again for being our guardian angel. Not an angel. I thought, closing my car door, just someone who learned long ago that the best disasters are the ones that never happen, and the best revenge isn't served cold, it's served as a restoration from a backup no one knew existed. I unlocked my front door, set down my bag, and poured myself a glass of wine. Somewhere in the city, our servers hummed along, creating backup after backup, preparing for disasters that might never come. But if they did, we'd be ready, because that's what guardians of data do. We prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and keep fear in a folder just in case. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope Emily's tale of digital vigilance and corporate karma resonated with you. Where are you listening from? I'd love to hear in the comments below. Let's connect and share our own workplace stories. If you enjoyed this revenge tale, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever had to deal with a manager who dismissed important safeguards? Or maybe you've been the one who saved the day with an unexpected backup. Drop your experiences in the comments. I read every single one.